Hey everyone, tonight we're stepping into a moment that begins with a gust of cold air. A woman gripping her suitcase a little too tightly and a blinking arrival board that offers no comfort at all. Picture this. I'm standing outside an airport terminal, freshly landed, expecting to see my son's car pull up a wave, a smile, that familiar "Hey Mum." But what greets me instead is no one. Just a sea of strangers, white LED lighting so harsh it makes your soul itch, and the slow, creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, I've been left behind. You might be thinking, he's just late, right? This is a misunderstanding, surely? That's what I thought too, for 7 whole minutes. So, before you feel that itch of disbelief, before you start screaming, this can't be real, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And hey, while we're sharing, drop your location and the time in the comments below. I love seeing where and when we all come together. Now turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise, and let's get started tonight. The wheels of the plane had barely kissed the runway when I felt that familiar buzz of hope stir in my chest. It was stupid, really. Hope at my age should come with a warning label, fragile contents handle with skepticism. I grabbed my coat, swung my small suitcase down from the overhead, and stepped out into the gate like someone expecting confetti and balloons. There weren't any. The airport smelled of industrial floor polish, wet wool, and desperation. I made my way to the arrivals curb, scanning faces. Surely he'd pull up any second now. Adam had said he'd be here. He always said that. And then sometimes he wasn't. But this time I believed him. I wanted to believe him. That's the cruel little trick about getting older. You start mistaking muscle memory for loyalty. I stood under the blinking passenger pickup sign. Cold wind licked through the automatic doors. I shifted from foot to foot, pulling out my phone. No missed calls, no texts. I called him once, straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's Adam. Leave a message." I didn't. Instead, I stood there a little longer. People rushed past with flowers, with hugs, with loud reunions that made my silence seem even louder. The exhaust fumes started to sink into my clothes. There's a saying I once read in some academic journal while waiting at the DMV airports are designed to be nowhere. A liminal space, technically. Not home, not vacation. Just the in-between. But I had never felt more nowhere than I did that night. Eventually I hailed a cab. The driver didn't look up as I climbed into the back seat. "Where to, ma'am?" "Home," I said quietly. It was a house Adam hadn't set foot in for years. The address he'd once known by heart. The one I had never changed foolishly, thinking stability meant something. As the cab merged onto the snowy highway, the city outside glittered with holiday lights. Families laughed behind frosted windows. The world didn't stop just because your son decided you were optional. My phone buzzed. "Marketing alert. Miss you, ready for your next vacation." I laughed. Not a ha-ha laugh, more like a "you've got to be kidding me" exhale. I opened my banking app. Adam's face stared back at me from the emergency contact list, smiling like a good son. Secondary card holder. Beneficiary. The irony was like biting into a cookie and tasting salt. A soft, academic voice in my head, the ghost of a sociology professor from college, murmured, "Emergency is often a question of perspective." Adam had assumed that what was mine would always be his. He thought love meant unlimited access. He was wrong. The cab jolted over a pothole. I didn't flinch. Instead, I tapped the freeze account button. It blinked twice. Then access suspended. I closed the app, leaned back, and watched the city glide past in streaks of light. Outside, snowflakes danced like static. Inside, I was no longer waiting for my son. I was waiting for something else. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. And maybe if I let myself hope one last time, peace. The cab dropped me off just after 9 p.m. My porch light was still on automatic, set to flicker on at dusk, like it had every night for the past 30 years. I stood there for a moment, one hand on the iron railing, the other gripping my suitcase like it might run away if I let go. The cabbie didn't say anything, just shifted into gear and drove off, taillights fading into the snow. I looked at the porch steps. Cracked a little crooked one, always groaned under the left foot. I'd been meaning to fix it since the Bush administration. I climbed up slowly, the cold air pricking my cheeks. A gust lifted the edge of my coat, like the house was trying to inhale me back in. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and old paper. The kind of scent that doesn't hit you until you've been away long enough to forget how it lives in your walls. I dropped my suitcase beside the umbrella stand. For a full 10 seconds, I just stood there, letting the quiet fill every inch of me. It was the kind of silence that presses on your ribs, not lonely, not sad, just true. The first thing I did wasn't kick off my shoes or turn on the heat. It was walk straight to my study, open my laptop, and log into my accounts. The screen bathed the room in a faint blue glow. My reflection hovered like a ghost in the glass. I looked tired, but I'd seen worse. Click! Adam's name was still everywhere. Emergency contact, secondary cardholder, trusted party, executor. Trusted. That word thudded like a stone in my chest. I began removing his name from everything. First, the bank accounts, then the credit cards, then the power of attorney documents I had filled out when I got my gallbladder removed and thought in a post-anesthesia fog that Adam would come through in an emergency. A little old age wisdom for you people reveal who they are in 3 moments: when they're given power, when they're denied it, and when they think you owe them forever. Adam had been handed all 3, and he'd failed the test every time. Click, click, click. Every removal was like snipping a thread, and I hadn't realized how many threads he'd tied around my life. I opened a legal document template, one I'd bookmarked months ago, but never had the guts to use, and began establishing a new trust account. Sole beneficiary Margaret Andrews. No successors, no add-ons, just me. It wasn't vengeance. It was insurance. The kind that doesn't just protect money, but peace. A curious fact I once read in a book about Waututu: spies, the quietest acts of rebellion, often began with paperwork. I wasn't jumping out of planes or decoding messages with lemon juice, but something in me thrilled at the rebellion of this quiet act. When the last signature box popped up on screen, I paused. My hand didn't shake. Not this time. Confirm. Done. By the time I shut the laptop, the snow outside had started to coat the hydrangeas in the front yard. The porch light flickered again. The house groaned as the heat clicked on. I walked into the kitchen, made a cup of weak chamomile, and leaned against the counter. My phone buzzed again. Adam, hey, your card's glitching again. Can you check? That was it. No, hi, Mom. No, did you land okay? Just the assumption that I was still on call for his convenience. My thumb hovered over the screen. For half a second, I considered answering. Old habits like biting your tongue or offering your last dollar die hard. But I didn't answer. Instead, I turned the phone face down. You know, there's this phrase in academic debate, burden of proof. It means whoever makes the claim has to prove it. Well, I wasn't making any claims anymore. I was done proving I was worthy of care. It was time for him to prove he was worth the access he took for granted. Spoiler, he wouldn't. Back in the study, I pulled open a drawer where I kept all the important things. A will, medical directives, copies of ID cards. All of it bore his name. I spent the next 2 hours removing it, my new emergency contact. A woman from church named Bernice, who once walked 2 miles in a thunderstorm just to bring me soup when I had the flu. She didn't ask for anything in return, just left the soup and a note, "You matter. Don't forget that." That's the kind of person who deserves your trust. When I finally crawled into bed, my bones ached, but my soul felt lighter than it had in years. I didn't dream that night. I just slept. Not because I was exhausted, but because for the first time in a long, long time, I was free. The next morning came in soft, pale blue. I woke before the sun reached the kitchen window. The house was still, but it no longer felt like a museum to someone else's comfort. It felt like mine. I made coffee, real coffee this time, strong enough to make my toes tingle, and sat at the old oak table I'd once bought with Adam's father, when we still believed life could be built from coupons and Saturday sales. The newspaper was folded neatly beside my mug, but I didn't reach for it. I reached for my laptop again. There was one more thread to cut. I logged into my credit profile. The layout hadn't changed. My name, my address, and beneath it, that familiar Leach authorized secondary card holder. Adam Andrews. I clicked into the details. Monthly usage between $2,000 and $5,000. Auto-paid. Quiet. Always. He once charged an entire Vegas weekend on that card. Told me afterward it was networking. I told myself it was his way of chasing ambition. But deep down, I knew I was just funding the delusion. One click remove, authorized user. Confirmation screen. Are you sure this action cannot be undone? Yes, I was sure. I clicked confirm, and just like that, another thread snapped. Clean. Outside, a couple walked past the window. She was carrying a bouquet of winter tulips. He was reading something off his phone. Their laughter echoed briefly, then vanished into the cold. Inside, my phone buzzed. Adam card declined. Again. Can you check? It buzzed again before I could even open the message. Adam. What's going on, Mom? I'm at the store. He hadn't called me Mom in months. Usually it was hey or you around. I didn't respond. Instead, I finished my coffee. Let me tell you something. I wish someone had told me earlier. Silence isn't passive. It's an active choice. And sometimes it's the loudest language you can speak. In psychological studies, there's one from Stanford. I always remember they say, cutting contact isn't cruelty, it's self-preservation. My phone buzzed again. I turned it over and placed it upside down. Then I walked over to the file cabinet in the study, pulled out the thick blue folder that held my estate documents, and sat down to finish what I had started the night before. Page by page, I changed everything. No more Adam as beneficiary. No more emergency access. No more will splits just in case. I redirected the bulk of my assets to 3 places: a women's shelter in the next town, over a non-profit for elder legal protection, and a small arts education fund I'd donated to quietly for years. That last one, it was in memory of my husband. He used to say, give to things that keep the world soft. The world's already hard enough. As I signed the final page, something inside me stilled. My hand was steady, and my breath was even. Do you know the strangest part? It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like relief. I slid the new papers into the fireproof box, clicked it shut, and stacked it neatly on the bottom shelf. Just as I stood to stretch, my phone buzzed once more. A voicemail. I listened. Hey, Mom. I don't know if something's wrong with the bank or your account or whatever, but I can't get groceries. Can you call me back? Please. He sounded irritated, not scared, not concerned, just annoyed, like I'd misplaced a sock he needed for a date. And I realized something. He didn't miss me. He missed the version of me that fixed everything. I once read in a quirky article that if you take away a toddler's toy, they cry, not because they miss you, but because you were the bridge to the toy. That's how dependency works. It's not love, it's access. I deleted the voicemail. Then I opened the cabinet one last time, pulled out my wedding ring, still tucked inside a velvet pouch, and placed it on the desk. I'd worn it for years after my husband died, like it was a shield, a reminder, a promise. But that promise was fulfilled. That chapter was closed. I slid the ring into a small wooden box and tucked it away. And for the first time in my adult life, my hands were completely, absolutely, unmistakably mine. It was supposed to be just another quiet night. I'd lit a candle, made some tea, slipped into my softest cardigan, the one with a hole in the left sleeve I never got around to fixing. I was flipping through an old recipe book I hadn't opened in years when my laptop buzzed. A notification, not from Adam, not a bill, not spam. It was a live stream link, Tina's birthday party. I clicked without thinking. Habit, maybe. Or maybe it was curiosity dressed up as care. And there it was, a glittering ballroom, champagne fountains, gold balloons, soft jazz turned loud pop, guests in tuxedos, Tina in a backless sequin dress, and Adam front and center, grinning. I sat back, my tea cooling in my hands. There's a special kind of hurt that doesn't arrive as a slap, it sneaks in like fog. Watching my son toast his wife with a smile that hadn't visited me in years, that did it. I had given everything to him. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every busted dream. When his first business failed, I had drained my retirement fund to keep his lights on. He called it just a short-term float. I called it love. Potato, potato. Now here he was, laughing, handing Tina a tiny velvet box. She gasped. Diamond earrings. The expensive kind. The brand I once co-signed a line of credit for when Adam wanted to impress investors. The earrings sparkled like small betrayals. You know what stung most? Not that I wasn't invited. Not even that he'd bought those earrings with money that had started in my veins. It was that no one at that party even knew I existed. They were toasting a future I had built brick by brick, dime by dime with my absence. And suddenly I understood something I never let myself say aloud. I hadn't been forgotten. I'd been erased. A fun tidbit I once read in ancient Rome: senators who fell out of favor weren't just exiled, they were damnatio memoriae, their names literally chiseled off monuments. The Romans didn't believe in letting traitors exist in memory. Apparently my son was a fan of ancient history. I closed the laptop slowly. The glow vanished, leaving me in a quiet so deep it pressed against my chest. No texts, no missed calls, no explanations. I didn't cry. Instead, I poured the tea down the sink and opened my Plan B folder, the one Adam didn't know about. Inside was everything I'd prepared in the event of a worst-case scenario. Spoiler, this wasn't even the worst case. This was just expected. Banking passwords, legal documents, investment accounts he hadn't touched. Yet, I opened a secure browser and navigated to my offshore bank. The cursor blinked. Open new international account. Yes, I filled in the fields. My name, my ID, routing preferences. When it asked about beneficiaries, I typed none and underlined it in my mind. Finally, the screen asked, "Would you like to transfer existing assets?" I clicked yes. There was no animation, no confetti, just a clean green check mark and a message: transfer complete. Account secure. Across town, Adam was probably laughing, maybe pouring another round. Tina was probably dancing. The earrings sparkled. My name wasn't mentioned. But that's fine. I wasn't trying to be remembered. I was making sure they couldn't reach me again. Here's a little old age wisdom: peace doesn't always arrive like a parade. Sometimes it comes as a bank transfer and the knowledge that nobody else can bleed you dry ever again. I went to bed that night without locking the door. Not because I forgot, but because I finally didn't feel afraid. Let them celebrate. Let them drink champagne. I was done funding the bubbles. The next morning, Adam posted a Facebook status. "Anyone know a good loan officer? Life happens." Just like that. No context. No humility. Just a half joke tossed into the void, fishing for attention. Or pity. Probably both. I stared at the post on my phone, the screen glowing against the soft morning light streaming through my blinds. The comments came fast, laughing emojis, casual sympathy, one or two offers to chat offline. No one suspected a thing. That's the thing about people who always land on their feet. Eventually they forget. It was someone else building the ground under them the whole time. I sipped my coffee. Strong, no sugar. Meanwhile, his world was starting to crack. A fun fact I once read in a behavioral economics book: people don't feel loss equally. Losing something you expected to lose hurts less than losing something you thought was permanent. It's called the endowment effect. Adam had thought I was permanent. A few hours later, the first real fracture hit him like a breeze that turns into a blizzard. It started with a beep. He was at the grocery store. Organic milk, oat flour, whatever nonsense Tina insisted was clean eating that week. The total was close to 250 tis. He swiped his card. Declined. Tried again. Declined. The teenager behind the register looked about 12 and had glitter nail polish. She didn't even blink. Just said, "You might want to call your bank." From what I heard later, because gossip in financial circles travels faster than light, he left the cart right there, full of almond butter and kale chips, and practically ran out. Meanwhile, across town, I was putting a loaf of banana bread into the oven. The house smelled like vanilla and brown sugar. Peace doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it's the smell of baking without your phone buzzing every 10 minutes. Of course, that peace didn't last long. My phone did buzz. "Adam, Mom, something's up with the account. Again. Can you check?" "Adam, also, my mortgage bounced. Is this a system error?" "Adam, call me." I set the phone down next to the butter dish and kept stirring the icing. No dramatic pauses. No rehearsed speeches. Just sugar cream cheese and a decision already made. I had given him decades. He couldn't have one more minute. Later that night, I heard from Bernice, my emergency contact, and unofficially my guardian angel in orthopedic sneakers. She said Tina had been asking around at church, trying to find someone who still spoke to me. Not because she cared, of course. Because she needed access. "She even asked about your will," Bernice said, practically cackling into the phone. I raised an eyebrow. Tina didn't bake banana bread. Tina didn't even know where I banked. But Tina knew where the money lived. Or at least, where it used to live. "Guess she's in for a surprise," Bernice added. "Oh," I said, sprinkling walnuts on the loaf. "She hasn't even begun to be surprised." A short academic aside here in estate law, there's something called undue influence. It's when someone manipulates an elder to benefit from their will. It's hard to prove, but it's even harder to pull off when the elder in question saw it coming 2 years ago and took every precaution possible. I had a lawyer. I had files. I had a little something I liked to call a paper fortress. The banana bread cooled on the rack. I cut 2 slices, one for me, one for Bernice, who was coming by in the morning. And as I wiped down the counter, I realized something strange. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. Done making excuses. Done filling gaps. Done pretending that love meant bleeding quietly. I walked upstairs, brushed my teeth, put on my night cream, and as I climbed into bed, I whispered, not to God, not to the dark, just to myself. Let it burn, if it has to. The matches weren't in my hands anymore. But the fuel, that had always been theirs. I should have known the knock would come. It was just after 3 p.m., a Tuesday, too cold for casual visits, and I was curled up under a throw blanket, re-watching Murder, She Wrote, as one does when the world outside is mostly grey and the world inside is finally quiet. 3 raps, firm, not friendly. I opened the door to find a courier standing there, teeth chattering beneath a navy blue cap. "Margaret Andrews?" he asked. I nodded. He handed me a thin envelope marked "Legal Service" in bold red. "Have a great day," he muttered, already halfway back to his van. I closed the door slowly, my fingers tracing the seal. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being used like a debit card with a pulse, now they were delivering court documents to my door like bad pizza. I sat down, opened it, and read. Notice of intended legal action, filed jointly by Adam Andrews and Tina Andrews. The accusations were laughable mental incompetence, elder neglect, I'd apparently neglected myself, undue outside influence, and my personal favourite, potential financial mismanagement. That last one got a real laugh out of me. A quirky fun fact. The most mismanaged item in my life right now was a sock drawer, and even that had improved. I placed the letter down beside my tea and took a long sip. Chamomile with a splash of defiance. They were coming for me. Not out of love, not even for control. For money. Pure and simple. And the saddest part, I had seen this story play out 100 times. At church. At bingo night. in whispered stories passed between women who'd raised ungrateful children and hoped silence would someday bloom into gratitude. It never did. I called Ms. Carter, my lawyer. She didn't answer immediately, so I left a message. They're suing. Let's play chess. She called back an hour later. I've seen these kinds of cases, she said. They'll try to make you look fragile, manipulable, maybe even unstable. I've got documentation, I told her. I know, she replied. But Margaret, I think it's time to stop just defending. It's time to dismantle. We set a meeting for Thursday. That night, I pulled out my receipts. Literal ones. Years of bank statements, texts from Adam, asking for just a little help, and voice memos where he half joked about bleeding Mum dry while Tina laughed in the background. You'd be surprised how much evidence lives in your inbox if you stop deleting guilt. At one point, I found an email from Adam marked urgent. He'd been locked out of his crypto wallet. Can you wire 5K to this temporary account? I swear I'll pay you back. He didn't, but now it would pay me forward. I printed everything, page after page of quiet betrayal. Old age wisdom for you: never underestimate a woman who has spent her whole life saving other people. She probably knows exactly where the exits are. The next morning I went downtown. Ms. Carter's office was warm, lined with law books and clean wood furniture that smelled like lemon polish and power. She glanced at my files, eyebrows rising. Margaret, she said, lips twitching into something almost admiring, you didn't just prepare, you archived. I'm retired, I said. I had time. We organized everything. Exhibits A through R. Personal testimony, witness statements, emergency contact logs, every legal breadcrumb. And just like that, my silence transformed into structure. My years of giving into years of evidence. By the time I left her office, the sky had darkened. Winter dusk. As I walked home, I passed a bakery with a sign in the window. Hot pies for cold hearts. I smiled. Thought about getting one. Didn't. Instead, I bought flowers, tulips just starting to open. I placed them in the vase by the kitchen window when I got home. The petals glowed faintly in the early night. The house was still, but now the stillness felt like armor. Let them come. I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor wax. It wasn't large, not like the kind on TV with dramatic lighting and high-stakes music. Just a small municipal room with scuffed wood, a humming ceiling vent, and a judge who looked like she had zero patience for melodrama. I liked her immediately. Ms. Carter and I arrived early. I sat at the long table with my hands folded neatly, not clenched, not shaking. I wore a slate grey pantsuit and a string of pearls I hadn't touched since my husband's funeral. Something about pearls, they whisper instead of scream. Across from us sat Adam and Tina. He looked tired, too pale, eyes slightly bloodshot. His tie was too loose and his suit too tight, like a boy playing dress-up in his father's closet. Tina, on the other hand, came prepared. Black dress, smudged mascara, and the world's most convincing, wounded expression. If I didn't know better, I'd have believed she'd just lost a family dog. Court is now in session, the bailiff said. The judge lifted her glasses, glanced at the file in front of her. Case 143A, Andrews v. Andrews. Allegations of undue influence, financial incompetence, and elder endangerment. Plaintiffs, you may proceed. Their lawyer, a young man who looked like he still got carded for beer, stood. Your Honor, we're deeply concerned about the welfare of Mrs. Andrews. He began, his voice shaking just enough to suggest rehearsed sincerity. There's strong reason to believe she's been manipulated, perhaps coerced into making recent financial decisions that don't align with her past behavior. I tilted my head just slightly. Interesting tactic. Pretend like I'd been led astray instead of admitting they just lost access to their personal gold mine. When it was Ms. Carter's turn, she didn't waste time with flourishes. She stood, slid a single manila folder across the bench. Your Honor, she said calmly, my client isn't here to defend herself with speculation. We've brought evidence. Let's start with Exhibit A. She opened the binder. Page 1. A series of texts from Adam over the past 5 years. each one asking for money. Rent car payments, business investments, emergency vet bills, they never owned a pet. Page 2, bank statements, showing every single transaction. Thousands withdrawn, month after month, from Margaret Andrews's accounts to cover expenses not her own. Page 3, a voice recording. Tina's voice sharper than glass, saying, "If we don't get control now, we'll be stuck with scraps when she finally goes." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the judge leaned back slightly. Exhibit B, Ms. Carter continued. Signed directives dated over the last 2 years, explicitly outlining Mrs. Andrews' wish to separate her financial estate. All notarized, all legal, all predating any alleged coercion. Tina's mouth parted slightly. Adam sat very still. I didn't look at them. I kept my gaze on the judge. "Would you like to respond?" she asked the plaintiffs. Adam stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, voice tight. "My mum has always needed help. She doesn't realize how vulnerable she is. We were only trying to protect her." I finally spoke. Softly, measured. "I raised Adam after his father died," I said. "I put him through school, covered his failed startups, paid for his wedding when he was drowning in debt. I delayed my own retirement to make sure he never went without." I took a breath. "But I never gave him permission to treat me like an ATM with a heartbeat." The silence was weighty. "Being old," I added, "doesn't mean being stupid." A pause. Then from the bench, "This court finds the plaintiff's claims without merit," the judge said, voice crisp. "This appears to be a case of financial exploitation, not protection." All claims dismissed. She looked directly at Adam. "And let me be clear, further attempts to gain access under false pretenses may be subject to legal scrutiny." Bang, gavel down. Tina's chair scraped as she stood up too fast. Adam's hands twitched in his lap. I stood slowly, collected my papers, and walked out. Not triumphant, just free. Later that afternoon, a local journalist stopped me outside the courthouse. Small town, big mouths. "Ms. Andrews," she said, eyes wide. "Is it true your son left you stranded at the airport?" I met her gaze. "That's not where he left me," I said. "That's where I left him." The next morning, the headline read, "Mother left at airport wins lawsuit against son for financial exploitation." I folded the paper, set it beside my tea. I didn't need applause. I had something better. Peace. The weirdest part, it wasn't the trial. It was what came after. The quiet. Not the unsettling kind that follows an argument where you keep replaying what you could have said better. This was the kind of quiet that slipped under your skin and stayed comforting, expansive. Like walking into your home after everyone else has left and suddenly realizing the house breathes easier without company. I had always imagined that ending things with Adam, really ending them, would feel like sawing off a limb. Instead, it felt like taking off a coat that had been wet and heavy for years. But Adam wasn't done. People like him rarely are. The first signs were digital. A public Facebook post from Tina drenched in fake humility. Some parents forget who raised them. Sad how love gets twisted when money's involved. Prayers appreciated. It racked up comments like mold collects in a damp corner. "Oh no, Tina sending hugs." She always seemed off, honestly. Parents these days? So selfish. I scrolled through them with the same detachment I reserve for conspiracy theories and pudding recipes that require avocados. Then came the messages. Not from Adam, not from Tina. From mutuals, distant cousins, former neighbors, old high school friends I hadn't spoken to since Reagan was in office. "Hey, just wanted to check in. Tina says things are getting ugly. You okay? Do you need help? People are starting to talk. Why don't you just give them something? Make peace. Make peace." Isn't that funny? Peace is exactly what I made, just not the flavor they preferred. Here's some old age wisdom for you. People don't want resolution. They want comfort, preferably theirs. And if your peace feels like their discomfort, well, that's your fault now. I didn't respond. Not to any of them. Instead, I focused on something better. A project. See, a few days after the ruling, Ms. Carter invited me to a luncheon. She introduced me to someone from the Department of Aging, a sharp woman in bold glasses named Connie. She'd read about my case. She leaned in during introductions and whispered, "You don't know how many women you just inspired." I smiled politely. She handed me a brochure. "Take Back the Ledger. Financial Defense for Women, 60 plus. Would you consider speaking?" she asked. "Just once, nothing big." I took the brochure home, placed it on my kitchen counter, and stared at it for 3 days. On the fourth, I called Connie back. "When's your next opening?" I asked. That Wednesday, I stood in the sunlit meeting room of the town library. Just folding chairs, a chalkboard, a tray of lemon cookies and weak coffee. But to me, it felt like Carnegie Hall. 12 women sat in a semicircle. Widows, divorcees, grandmothers, caregivers. A few were younger than me, some older. All of us had that same quiet in our eyes, the kind that gets mistaken for shyness, but is really exhaustion dressed up as grace. I started speaking, not from notes, not with a podium. I told them the truth. That I had funded 3 of Adam's failed businesses. That I'd missed vacations, skipped buying a new coat, cashed out retirement accounts early. That I let guilt write checks that love could never cash. And then I told them the turning point. The airport, the suitcase, the silence. One woman cried. Another nodded so hard I thought her neck might give out. I wrapped up with this. Your name belongs on your own bank account. Your signature belongs on your freedom. And your story. It belongs to you, not to the people who edited you out of theirs. There was a pause. Then the slowest, warmest ripple of applause I've ever heard. No standing ovations, no flowers. Just women reclaiming themselves, one nod at a time. Afterward, one of them, Margie, late 60s, fierce red lipstick, pulled me aside. "My son's been living in my basement rent-free for 6 years, she whispered. "I haven't seen my social security check since 2018. I gave her the number of Ms. Carter. "You're not alone," I told her. "And you're not wrong." That night, I went home to my quiet kitchen, opened my laptop, and drafted a new clause for my will. 70% of my estate. To be distributed among women's legal aid centers, elder financial literacy programs, and transitional housing for senior women in crisis. Ms. Carter would have choked on her wine if she hadn't seen it coming. When I emailed her the clause, she replied with 2 words. "You're unstoppable." I smiled. That wasn't what I was aiming for. I just didn't want to be invisible anymore. The envelope arrived on a Thursday. No return address. Cream-colored paper. Heavy, formal. At first, I thought it was another thank you letter from someone in the seminar, maybe, or the Department of Aging. I even smiled when I sliced it open with my old letter opener shaped like a feather. Then I read the header. Subject notice of pending lawsuit. Allegation of elder abuse and mental incompetence, filed by Adam Andrews and Tina Andrews. Again. Only this time they'd taken it up a notch. Claimed I was being manipulated by outside parties. That the workshops were evidence of my confused mental state. That I had been coerced into financial decisions that placed me in potential danger. I sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight pouring in from the window, the breeze ruffling the edge of the envelope. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I laughed. Not a bitter laugh, not angry either. Just amused. There's a phrase I love in academic circles, epistemic closure. It's the moment when someone refuses to accept new evidence because their worldview can't hold it. Adam and Tina couldn't accept the idea that I didn't need saving, especially not by them. I called Ms. Carter. She didn't even sound surprised. "They're losing access," she said, "so they're trying to paint you as incompetent to get it back." "Let them try," I said. "I've got enough evidence to build a fortress." She exhaled slowly. "We'll counter-sue if we need to. But Margaret, this is going to get public." "Good," I replied, voice steady. "I'm done hiding." A few days later, I found myself standing in front of a mirror, applying lipstick I hadn't worn in years. Not for anyone else, for me. Because if I was going to go to war, I'd at least show up looking like the general. Court was set for the following Tuesday. In the days leading up to it, Adam tried calling. 4 times. Tina emailed. Her message was a slurry of veiled threats and sugar-coated concern. We're doing this for your safety. You've been acting out of character. We love you. This isn't personal. But it was. It always had been. And love. Love that comes with conditions isn't love. It's credit. And I was all out of balance. So, the morning of the hearing, I arrived early. Same courthouse. Different room this time. The air smelled the same, like dusty carpet and recycled heat, but I wasn't the same. I wore navy, not grey. A subtle difference, but important. Grey said neutral. Navy said try me. Tina walked in, flanked by her attorney. Black dress again. More mascara. Adam followed, no tie this time. Eyes darting around the room like he was looking for an escape hatch. Ms. Carter leaned over and whispered, "They don't look ready." "I didn't come here to argue," I said. "I came here to end." The judge was different this time. Younger, polished, stern. He opened with the charges: financial incompetence, emotional volatility, and suspected coercion. Tina's lawyer stood first. Talked for nearly 20 minutes. All fluff. Words like concerning behavior, sudden withdrawal from family delusional beliefs. He even referenced my workshops as an effort to manipulate others into mirroring her irrational actions. Ms. Carter stood with one folder. One. "Your Honor," she said, "let's keep this simple." She opened to a document signed by 3 separate physicians, each attesting to my mental fitness. Then bank records again this time, highlighting the steady, methodical way I'd moved my accounts. Then screenshots of Tina's social media posts about getting what we deserve. And finally, a voice memo from Adam's bar outburst. The old bat should have just rolled over and handed it all over. We earned it. The judge paused, looked up. "Do the plaintiffs have anything else to submit?" Tina's mouth opened, closed. Adam muttered something that didn't make it to the mic. "No," the judge said. "Then I'm ready to rule." He didn't waste breath. Case dismissed. Mrs. Andrews is of sound mind, financial stability, and emotional autonomy. This court advises the plaintiffs to discontinue further attempts or face legal consequence. Bang. Done. Tina turned red. Adam slumped like air leaking from a balloon. I stood, gathered my coat, and walked out. Again. Only this time I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was walking into the rest of my life. The day after court, I didn't celebrate. I watered the houseplants. I cleaned out the fridge. I took a walk to the corner cafe and ordered a cinnamon roll I'd usually talk myself out of because you don't need it, Margaret. But that morning I did. I needed something sweet, something warm, something that didn't come with paperwork explanations or legal defense. The barista, maybe 19, barely out of braces, handed it over with a smile. "Big plans today." I paused, then smiled back. "Just not waiting on anyone." She blinked. "Didn't get it. That's okay. Younger folks don't understand what it means to have lived decades in response to someone else's needs, to constantly be a support beam in someone else's collapsing house." The media picked up the story again. The headline this time wasn't sensational. Just simple. "Woman wins back financial independence in landmark family dispute." It didn't go viral. No angry comment storms, no hashtags. But the emails started. Women from everywhere. Florida, Kansas, upstate New York. One woman wrote from a boat off the coast of Oregon. They weren't asking for advice. They were sharing their own quiet wars. "I've been co-signing loans for my daughter since 2008. She hasn't had a job in 5 years. My son put my name on a condo I've never seen. Now the IRS thinks I'm a landlord. They keep saying I'm confused, but I remember every single time I was their safety net." I wrote each one back, slowly, carefully. Sometimes with just one line, "You are not wrong." Sometimes with referrals, with lawyer names, with a checklist I was slowly building, red flags, loopholes, scripts to say no, because no one teaches you how to protect yourself from the people you love. But maybe I could. A few weeks later, Connie from the Department of Aging called again. "Margaret, we're launching the pilot series of the workshop. We want you to teach it." I nearly dropped the phone. "Teach," I repeated. "I'm not." "You are," she said. "You just proved it." She sent me the draft curriculum. I added a few things. Lesson 1. You're allowed to close doors without giving a tour of the inside first. Lesson 4. Saying no isn't cruel, it's currency. Lesson 7. The people who benefit from your silence will always call your boundaries betrayal. Wednesday came. First session. I arrived early as usual, set out the chairs, brewed the coffee, taped up the welcome sign with shaky hands but a calm heart. They trickled in, older women mostly, but a few men too. One I recognized from my water aerobics class, another from the church choir. We didn't start with law or finances. We started with one question. What would you do if you weren't afraid of being called selfish? The room went quiet. Then the floodgates opened. Stories poured out like warm honey. And suddenly, I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a lighthouse. Here's a curious fact I'd read once in an old psychology paper. The moment you share your shame, it stops being shame. It becomes memory, data, a teaching tool. Every time I stood in front of that group, I felt a little taller, a little louder. Not because I was shouting, but because I finally had something to say. Later that week, I sat at my kitchen table updating my living trust. I made a few more changes, removed some language, added one line in bold. Assets are to be managed solely by the grantor until death or written consent is otherwise provided, regardless of familial relation or prior expectations. Ms. Carter reviewed it and sent back a thumbs-up emoji. Progress, I suppose, speaks in all languages. I no longer checked my phone nervously. I no longer braced for emergencies that weren't mine. And I no longer answered texts that began with "can you?" That's the thing about reclaiming your life. At first it feels selfish. Then it feels necessary. And finally, it feels like the only sane thing you've ever done. It took me exactly 3 days to open Adam's letter. I found it one morning on my welcome mat, nestled between a real estate flyer and a catalogue for home stair lifts I'd never ordered, but according to my mailman was right on schedule. The envelope was plain. No return address. His handwriting unmistakable, half rushed, a little slanted, like his thoughts had always run faster than his intentions. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the counter while I folded, laundry ran a load of dishes, and watered the peace lily that only thrived when I ignored it. By the third afternoon, the envelope was still there, daring me. So I made a cup of tea, Earl Grey this time, not chamomile, and opened it with the tip of my nail. Inside one sheet of paper, scrawled across the middle in uneven lines. I need you, Mom. Not just financially. I'm in trouble. Legal trouble. I didn't know it had gotten this far. Please help me. No, dear Mom. No, I'm sorry. No mention of Tina. Just panic poured into ink. My fingers didn't tremble. My heart didn't race. If anything, the silence inside me deepened like the still surface of a lake that's already frozen over. Here's a fact you won't find in most psychology books. Regret is often just fear with a new haircut. Adam wasn't suddenly remorseful. He was desperate. Desperation is not the same thing as reflection. I folded the letter, slid it into a manila envelope, attached a post-it note. Relevant material regarding suspected fraud. Source unsolicited confession. I addressed it to the Financial Crimes Investigation Bureau. No emotion, no explanation, just facts. Dropped it off the next morning with the rest of my mail. Then I walked to my favorite cafe, ordered a croissant, and sat by the window. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel proud. I felt accurate. A curious piece of old age wisdom: you are not obligated to preserve someone's dignity if they've spent years dismantling yours. Shh. The weeks that followed were a blur of calm. Workshops filled every Wednesday morning. My freedom and finance circle, as Connie named it, grew from 12 women to almost 30. We had guest speakers, lawyers, social workers, even a retired IRS agent who once helped a woman hide her money in mason jars legally, of course. One Wednesday, Margie stood up during Q&A and said, "I finally said no to my daughter. First time in 18 years. I said it and I meant it." And you know what happened? Nothing. The world didn't collapse. She just went silent. I smiled so hard I nearly dropped my clipboard. Another woman, Sharon, added, My grandson tried to take out a payday loan in my name. I called the police. I never thought I'd be that woman, but I am now, and I slept like a baby. They weren't just protecting their money anymore. They were protecting their names, their stories. There's a theory in feminist legal studies. Yes, I read everything that says the law often erases caretakers because their sacrifices are unpaid, unmeasured, unacknowledged. But not in our room. In our room, every unpaid bill, every signed tuition check, every late-night rescue phone call, it counted. It built our currency, not in dollars, but in spine. Later that month, Connie handed me a grant application. "Margaret," she said, "we want to scale the program statewide." I laughed. I really laughed. "You want me on a brochure?" She grinned. "I want you everywhere. You're the reason some women are sleeping through the night again." I didn't say yes, not right away, but something in my chest caught fire. Not rage, not grief, something closer to purpose. The arrest made the evening news. I was drying dishes when Eleanor burst through my back door. She never knocks and shouted, "Turn on the TV like now." I dropped my dish towel, turned to Channel 6, and there it was. Lower third banner flashing red. Local entrepreneur arrested in multi-state fraud case. His mugshot came next. Adam, my son, unshaven, hollow-eyed. Still wearing that puffy vest he thought made him look like a venture capitalist. The anchor read the details in that flat, almost cheerful tone they reserve for disasters happening to strangers. Adam Andrews, age 38, was taken into custody this afternoon, following an ongoing investigation into check fraud, identity theft, and misappropriation of emergency financial accounts, many of which belonged to elderly relatives. Sources close to the case say a family member's cooperation was key to the charges being filed. Eleanor turned the volume down and gave me a look equal parts worry and respect. "You okay?" she asked. I wiped my hands, slow and steady. "I'm fine," I said. And I was. The odd thing about grief is that it doesn't always hit like thunder. Sometimes it slips in, quietly shrugs, and sits in the corner like it's always been part of the furniture. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just stood there. A fact I once read in a criminal psychology textbook: most white-collar criminals don't believe they're doing anything wrong. They believe they're entitled. Adam had believed that for years. That he was owed. That my love came with compound interest. And I had paid. Over and over. But not anymore. I made tea, the strong kind, no sugar. Eleanor sat at the table watching me like I was a rare bird in a documentary she didn't want to startle. "He's your son," she said gently. "This can't be easy." I sat down with a sigh. It's not, but it's right. Oh, later that evening, I pulled out my journal. I hadn't written in a few days. Life had been full of spreadsheets, seminars, and court prep. But I opened to a fresh page and wrote one line. I opened his letter. Then I closed the chapter, underlined it twice, folded the page back. That was it. In the days that followed, I didn't read the articles. I didn't refresh news feeds. I didn't answer the dozens of messages that suddenly poured in, people who hadn't spoken to me in years, now reaching out with performative concern. One woman even sent a fruit basket. I placed it on the church donation table. Let someone else pick at the apologies wrapped in cellophane. And Tina, she vanished, moved out of the house, according to Bernice's cousin, who worked at the title office. Took the car, the dog, and the last shreds of their social credibility. Her final act, a public Facebook rant that read, "Some people will burn down a family just to feel warm. If you know, you know." It got 5 likes, mostly from MLM girls and distant ex-friends. I didn't respond, not even to roll my eyes. Instead, I forwarded the entire post to Ms. Carter, who added it to a new file marked potential future litigation. Just in case, because peace, while lovely, still benefits from a lawyer. One night, I found myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan, thinking back to a specific birthday, my 60th. I had waited all day for Adam to call. He never did. He posted a photo that night, instead, him and Tina laughing in Miami. The caption read, "Building our empire one mojito at a time." I remembered how my heart had sunk, but I'd still texted him, "Love you. Stay safe." He never replied. But now I finally understood. He didn't forget. He just didn't care. That's a truth no mother wants to write down. But I did. In black ink, capital letters. Then I closed the journal and slept like I hadn't in 20 years. My mornings started slower after the trial, after the arrest, after everything. I no longer woke with a pit in my stomach, or the sense that someone somewhere needed something I'd forgotten to give. I made coffee without looking at my phone. I answered only the calls I wanted. I even learned how to make sourdough starter, which, as any octogenarian YouTuber will proudly tell you, is a lifestyle, not a recipe. But then came another envelope. Plain hand-delivered. No postage. Just slipped beneath my door one morning like a shadow. Inside, a handwritten note. "Please, Mom. I didn't mean for it to go this far. They're saying I could go to prison. I need help. Just help." There was no love Adam. No, I'm sorry. Not even a "how are you?" Just fear, compressed into paper. I stared at it for a while, set it on the counter, made toast, ate the toast, watered the houseplants. Still it sat there. By late afternoon, I picked it up again, reread it, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel tired. I felt resolved. He wasn't reaching out because he saw me. He was reaching out because I had something he wanted. Again. Old age wisdom for today: some people don't want you back. They want the version of you that saved them. That version was gone. So I pulled out a fresh manila envelope, attached the new letter to the growing file I'd started with Ms. Carter. I wrote on a sticky note submitted without commentary, for records only, and placed it in the outgoing mail bin for her office. No dramatic music, no trembling hands, just quiet, because some threads don't need to be cut. They disintegrate on their own. A week later, the sky was the kind of blue that hurts to look at. You know, the kind honest and wide with no clouds to soften the truth. I met Connie and Eleanor for lunch at a cafe near the boardwalk. Ms. Carter joined, too unusually casual in jeans and sunglasses. They were all talking about the upcoming workshop expansion, a statewide tour, a short documentary, a possible podcast, Financial Firewalls, with Margaret Andrews. I nearly choked on my iced tea. "I'm not a celebrity," I said. Eleanor grinned. "You're better. You're dangerous with a printer and a spreadsheet." Ms. Carter pulled out a folder because of course she did. "New update," she said. "Your second residency application approved. Full-time coastal housing with permanent senior status." I blinked. "You're saying I've got beachfront property in writing?" She tapped the folder. "Legally binding, if you want it." I looked out over the water. The sun shimmered against the tide like it was trying to wink at me. For a second, I let the moment stretch. Then I nodded. I want it. Back home, I brewed a cup of tea and opened my new planner. Marked the date. Move in June 15th. I wrote it slowly, carefully, like I was drawing a border between who I had been and who I refused to be again. The house was quieter that night, but not the kind of quiet that follows absence. The kind that follows decision. That night, I journaled again. One line. I choose silence that feeds me, not silence that starves me. And then I slept, deeply, because I had nothing left to explain, and no one left to convince. The suitcase sat by the front door for 3 days. Not because I was hesitating, no. Just because I was taking my time. There's something sacred about not rushing the beginning of the rest of your life. I'd already donated most of the furniture. The living room now echoed like a chapel, quiet and reverent. My old recliner went to a woman 2 streets over whose husband had just had surgery. The dining set gifted to the local shelter. My name wasn't engraved on any of it anyway, but the freedom in letting go that had my fingerprints all over it. I had one last thing to do. I took a photo. Me standing outside the same airport where it all began. Wind in my hair, suitcase in hand. Same building, different woman. Eleanor snapped it. "Smile like you're never coming back," she said. I did. The caption, my own words. The day I chose myself. I framed it. Set it by the door in my new apartment. Because some reminders aren't for visitors. They're for you when you forget how far you've come. Moving day was uneventful. No dramatic speeches, no weepy send-offs. Just me, a hired driver, and my suitcase with one busted zipper that I still refused to replace. The ferry ride to the island was smooth, sky wide open, wind cool and sharp, like fresh peppermint. I stood on the top deck with my coat zipped up to my chin, watching the shoreline fade. I didn't look back. There's a theory in cognitive therapy, one I stumbled on years ago in a brochure at a medical office, that says healing doesn't always feel like joy. Sometimes it feels like disorientation, like leaving a burning house only to realize you've never lived anywhere safe. That's what it felt like stepping off that ferry. Freedom, but strange. My new apartment overlooked the sea. Nothing fancy. Just whitewashed walls, big windows, and a patio with room for 2 chairs. One for me, one for whoever I became next. The welcome package included a set of keys, a folded map of the island, and a note. We're honored to offer you not just a room, but a refuge. Thank you for showing us what strength looks like. Coral Bay Sanctuary. I placed the note next to the framed photo from the airport. 2 artifacts of the same woman, just different pages. That first night, I didn't sleep much. I padded barefoot around the apartment, taking it in. The floors were cool tile, smooth beneath my soles. The windows let in the sound of the waves like breathing that never stopped. I made tea, sat on the patio, watched the stars show up one by one. No phone buzzed. No calendar reminders blinked. No panicked calls from Adam asking for wire transfers at 2 a.m. Just the sea, the wind, and me. Still here, still whole. 2 days later, I got a text from Connie. Check the website. I did. There it was. A landing page for the new program. Guardians of Our Own Stories. Financial autonomy for women over 60. Lead advisor Margaret Andrews. Below was a short paragraph with my photo taken on the ferry wind in my hair, that same stubborn smile. The bio ended with, Margaret believes silence can be a sword or a shield. Choose wisely. I reread that sentence a few times, felt it settle in my bones. Then I walked outside and sat in the sand, letting the breeze bury my feet. The past wasn't chasing me anymore. It had lost my forwarding address. I turned 70 on a Tuesday. No party, no balloons, no family dinner filled with stiff smiles and obligatory gifts. Just the ocean, a warm breeze, and a single smooth stone in my pocket. It was a gift from Eleanor wrapped in a paper napkin handed to me with no speech. On it, scratched faintly in ink, was one word, closure. I carried it with me to the shoreline that morning, barefoot in the damp sand, my hem brushing the edge of the waves. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, just a soft glow smudging the horizon like a watercolor painting. I stood there for a moment, remembered every version of myself I'd been. 25 and scared, 47 and exhausted, 60 and still hoping, and now 70, calm. I held the stone in my hand, feeling its weight, and I said out loud to no one in particular, this is where I end it, and where I begin. Then I threw it, not with force, not with drama, just enough to let it leave me. It skipped once, then vanished, gone. I didn't need to watch the splash. I already felt the ripple. Back at the apartment, a white envelope had been slid under my door. No postage, no return address. I didn't even flinch this time. Inside was a printed offer on embossed resort stationery. We invite you to consider permanent residency at Coral Bay Sanctuary. Your continued contribution to our community has not gone unnoticed. Should you wish to make this your home, this offer guarantees exclusive, uninterrupted tenancy. No sales pitch, no urgency, just possibility. I set it beside my morning tea and looked out the open balcony doors. The ocean sparkled casual and eternal. I didn't rush to sign. Instead, I brewed a second cup, sat in the sunlight, and whispered to myself, let's see what forever feels like. Oh, a few days later, I packed one last box, my journals, some photos, a single cardigan that still smelled like who I used to be. I left behind everything else. I donated my last bank statements to the workshop archives, names redacted, of course. Ms. Carter offered to throw me a party. Eleanor threatened to sneak champagne onto the ferry. I said no to both. My farewell didn't need confetti, just wind and waves. On my final evening, I took one last walk along the beach, past families laughing, children burying each other in sand, an older couple sharing headphones and a blanket. No one looked at me. No one recognized me. And that was the most beautiful thing of all. Freedom isn't being seen. It's being able to choose who sees you. Back in my apartment, I folded one last letter into my travel folder. My final will revision, signed just that morning. To the people I once gave everything I have, nothing left you didn't already waste. To the women still learning how to say no, take this as a map. I signed it in smooth, certain strokes. No trembling, no regret, just truth. I took the ferry out just after dawn. Same suitcase, same coat. But now, when the wind lifted my scarf, it didn't feel like something being pulled away. It felt like something taking flight. Adam didn't know I was leaving, and I didn't leave breadcrumbs, because some stories don't end with a rescue. They end with a woman walking into her own life alone and unafraid. The ocean hushes beneath her window now, not as a background, but as a rhythm, a promise. Margaret no longer waits for calls that never come. She doesn't tiptoe around the word selfish, and she no longer measures her worth by what she gives away. She sits on a balcony most evenings, tea in hand, watching the tide erase footprints she no longer needs to follow. The suitcase that once held her escape now holds her journals, her plans, her peace. She leads workshops not to preach, but to remind others that quiet doesn't have to mean small. That absence is not always abandonment, and that sometimes the most radical thing a woman can do is choose herself. Somewhere Adam still spins stories to sympathetic ears, but Margaret, she doesn't hear them anymore. She's too busy teaching others how to hold the pen, and maybe, just maybe, how to walk barefoot into the sea without looking back.